He rang up groceries for 30 years. Same corner store, same quiet smile, same worn name tag that said Frank. Nobody paid attention to him, until one morning a young police officer read that name tag and froze. Because that name was in his training manual, under Medal of Honor Recipients. Welcome to Silent Heroes Stories. Before we start this incredible story, tell me in the comments what city you are watching from today. If you believe silent heroes deserve recognition, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Frank Martinez came to work every morning at 6 a.m. Martinez Corner Store in East Chicago. Same routine for 30 years. Same quiet dedication. Frank was 62 years old, gray hair, kind brown eyes. He wore a red store vest over a white polo shirt. His name tag said Frank M. Nothing fancy, nothing special. The store was small, very small. 3 aisles, 1 register. Frank worked alone most days. He knew every customer, every regular, every kid who bought candy after school. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," he said to the elderly woman buying milk. "Morning, Frank. How's your knee today?" "Getting by, getting by." Frank never complained. His left leg had a slight limp. "Old injury," he said. "Work accident." People didn't ask more. The neighborhood loved Frank, always patient, always kind. When customers were short on money, Frank found a way. "Pay me next week," he'd say. He kept a small notebook of people who owed money. Most paid back. Frank never chased the ones who didn't. Children especially loved Frank. He kept candy near the register. Sometimes he gave free pieces to good kids. "Don't tell your parents," he'd wink. But Frank had strange qualities. He moved very quietly, very aware. His eyes always scanned the store, always watched the street, like he was checking for threats that weren't there. And Frank's hands were different, calloused, scarred, strong. When he lifted heavy boxes, he moved like someone much younger, like someone trained. The strangest thing, Frank never panicked, ever. When the store got robbed 2 years ago, Frank stayed calm. He gave the money, no resistance, but his eyes tracked everything, every detail, like he was memorizing for a report. Officer Jake Rodriguez sometimes stopped by, young cop, 25 years old, fresh from the academy. He bought coffee and donuts before his shift. "How's the neighborhood, Frank?" "Quiet today, should stay that way." "You always know what's happening." Frank smiled. "I pay attention." Jake noticed Frank's awareness too, the way he positioned himself behind the counter, always able to see the door, always ready. "Frank, you ever think about retiring?" "This is retirement." "What did you do before?" "Different work, long time ago." Jake could never get more information. Frank was polite but private, very private. Months passed. Jake noticed more things about Frank, small things, strange things. Frank's posture was too straight, too disciplined, like military bearing, and his vocabulary sometimes slipped, military words. "Frank, that group of teenagers looks like trouble." "Copy that. I'll keep eyes on." "Copy that. Yeah, I'll watch them." And Frank's reactions were too fast, too precise. When a customer dropped a bottle and it shattered, Frank moved instantly, not startled, controlled, like trained response. One morning, Jake arrived early. Frank was stocking shelves. Jake saw Frank's arms clearly, old scars, many scars, not work accidents. These were shrapnel wounds, combat wounds. "Frank, those are some serious scars." Frank pulled down his sleeves. "Old injuries." "What kind of work did you do?" "Government work." "What department?" "Different departments." Jake was getting curious. "Government work? What kind of government work left scars like that?" That afternoon, Jake did research. Frank Martinez, East Chicago. Social Security records showed Frank had worked at the store for 30 years. Before that, nothing. No employment history, no records. This was suspicious. How does someone have no work history before age 32? Jake dug deeper. Frank's address led to a small apartment. No car registration, no property ownership. Frank lived very simply, almost like someone hiding. The most interesting discovery was Frank's emergency contact. It listed Department of Veterans Affairs, not family, not friends, a government department. Jake called the VA. "I'm checking on Frank Martinez. Is he a veteran?" "I cannot give information about veterans." "Is it classified?" Long pause. "Some records are restricted." Restricted? Jake had never heard of restricted veteran records. That evening, Jake mentioned Frank to his sergeant. "Serge, you know Frank Martinez? Runs the corner store on 5th Street? Sergeant Williams looked up. "Hispanic guy? About 60? Quiet?" "Yeah, that's him." "What about him?" "Something's not right. No work history. Scars. Military behavior." Sergeant Williams was quiet. "Rodriguez, some veterans don't talk about their service." "Why?" Because some things are better left alone. 2 weeks later, Jake was reviewing training materials, Medal of Honor recipients, heroes of Vietnam and Afghanistan. He was memorizing names for his promotion exam. Frank Martinez, Green Beret, Special Forces, Medal of Honor recipient, Operation Phoenix, Vietnam 1971. Citation: single-handedly held position against enemy attack, saved 23 wounded soldiers, continued fighting despite multiple wounds. Jake stared at the page. Franklin Martinez, the same Frank from the corner store? He looked at the photo. Young man in military uniform, dark hair, same eyes, same facial structure, 30 years younger, but definitely the same person. Jake's hands shook. The quiet cashier was a Medal of Honor recipient, a war hero? The next morning, Jake went to the store. He watched Frank carefully. The way he moved, the way he held himself. The scars made sense now. Combat wounds, multiple combat wounds. Morning, Frank. Morning, Officer Rodriguez. Coffee? Yeah. Frank, can I ask you something? Sure. Is your full name Franklin Martinez? Frank stopped. For just a second, his eyes changed. More alert, more cautious. Why do you ask? Just curious. Yes, Franklin Martinez. Most people call me Frank. Jake pulled out his phone. He showed Frank the Medal of Honor webpage. Frank saw his own photo, his own citation. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Where did you find this? Training materials. You're a hero, Frank. Frank closed his eyes. I was a soldier. That's different. Jake read the citation aloud. Single-handedly held position against overwhelming enemy force, saved 23 wounded soldiers, continued fighting despite severe wounds, refused evacuation until all wounded were safe. Frank turned away. That was a long time ago. Frank, you're a Medal of Honor recipient. I'm a cashier, but you was, past tense. Jake didn't understand. Why don't you tell people? Because heroes are dead people. I'm alive. I sell groceries. Saturday afternoon. Store was busy. Frank was working alone. Families buying groceries. Kids buying candy. Normal day. At 2:30 p.m., 2 men entered. Late 20s, hoodies, nervous energy. Frank noticed immediately. They walked around the store but didn't shop. They watched Frank. They watched customers. Frank's training kicked in. Threat assessment. The men positioned themselves near the exit. One blocked the door. The other approached the counter. Empty the register, old man. Frank looked at him calmly. Excuse me? The man pulled out a gun. I said empty the register. Customers screamed. Children cried. Panic filled the store. Frank's demeanor changed instantly. 40 years of combat training activated. Okay. Stay calm. Let me open it. Frank pressed buttons on the register, but his eyes tracked everything. 2 gunmen. 1 weapon visible. Customers behind counter. Exit routes. Cover positions. The register opened. Frank slowly reached for the money. Hurry up. I'm going as fast as I can. Frank handed over the cash. Saturday's a slow day. The second gunman got impatient. Let's go. But the first gunman saw Frank's demeanor. Too calm. Too controlled. You're not scared. I'm scared. Just trying to cooperate. You look like a cop. I sell groceries. The gunman pressed the weapon closer. You seem too calm for an old man. That's when Frank made his decision. The gunman was too close to customers. Too unstable. Too dangerous. Frank moved faster than anyone expected. The years of Special Forces training exploded into action. In one motion, Frank grabbed the gunman's wrist, twisted the weapon away, and swept his legs. The gunman hit the floor hard. The second gunman reached for his own weapon, but Frank was already moving. Frank threw the register drawer, hitting the man in the chest, then tackled him before he could draw. Both gunmen were on the ground in less than 10 seconds. Customers stared in shock. The quiet old cashier had just disarmed 2 armed robbers with his bare hands. Frank held both men down with joint locks. Military restraint techniques, perfect form. Someone call 911, Frank said calmly. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly customer, pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Frank, how did you? I used to do different work. Jake arrived with backup in 4 minutes. He found Frank sitting calmly behind the counter. Both robbers were zip-tied with electrical cord Frank had found in the storage room. Frank, what happened? Attempted robbery. 2 suspects. Weapons secured. Jake looked around. No one was hurt. No damage. Perfect apprehension. Frank, how? Frank handed Jake the weapons. Muscle memory. The robbers were taken away. Customers gave statements, but everyone kept asking the same question. How did a 62-year-old cashier disarm 2 armed men? Jake stayed after everyone left. Frank, that was incredible. It was necessary. Where did you learn that? Frank sighed. Special Forces, Green Beret, long time ago. Frank, you're not just any veteran. You're Medal of Honor. Frank nodded slowly. Yeah? Why do you work here? Frank looked around the small store. Because this is peace. This is normal. This is what I fought for. Word spread quickly. the corner store cashier who disarmed robbers. But when people learned the truth, everything changed. Franklin Martinez, Medal of Honor recipient, Green Beret legend, working quietly as a cashier for 30 years. Local news wanted interviews. Frank declined. Veterans organizations wanted to honor him. Frank declined. The mayor wanted to give him a key to the city. Frank declined. Frank, Jake asked, why don't you want recognition? I get recognition every day. How? Mrs. Patterson says good morning. Kids smile when they buy candy. Mr. Johnson asks about my knee. That's recognition. Jake tried to understand. But you're a war hero. I was a soldier, now I'm a neighbor. The store owner, Mr. Hassan, learned the truth too. He offered Frank a promotion. Manager, higher pay. No thank you, Mr. Hassan. But Frank, you're famous. I don't want to be famous, I want to sell groceries. Customers started treating Frank differently. Some with too much respect, some with awkward distance. Frank noticed the change. Jake, people are acting strange. They're impressed. I don't want impressed. I want normal. Frank, you saved lives today. You've saved lives your whole career. Frank was quiet for a moment. In Vietnam, I saved soldiers so they could go home to their families. Here, I help families buy food for their homes. Same mission, different battlefield. That week, a group of veterans visited the store. They wanted to meet Frank. Sergeant Martinez, it's an honor. Frank shook their hands. Just Frank, and thank you for your service. Sir, we should be thanking you. We all served. We all did our part. Months passed. The attention faded. Frank returned to his quiet routine. But something had changed. The neighborhood respected Frank differently now. Not because he was famous, but because they understood his choice. He could have been anything, done anything. But he chose to serve them, to be their neighbor. Children still bought candy. Mrs. Patterson still asked about his knee. Johnson still complained about the weather. Frank still arrived at 6 a.m., still stocked shelves, still rang up groceries with a quiet smile. Jake stopped by regularly. Not as a cop checking on a hero, as a friend buying coffee. Frank, any regrets? About what? Staying here, not taking recognition. Frank looked around the store. Customers shopping. Families together. Peace. Jake, you know what my Medal of Honor citation says? Yeah, I memorized it. It says I saved 23 soldiers. But those soldiers went home and became fathers, teachers, builders, cashiers. They saved thousands more people by living good lives. Jake nodded. I'm not saving soldiers anymore. I'm serving neighbors. Same mission. A young mother approached with her children. She smiled at Frank. Hi, Frank. The usual? Yes, ma'am. Milk, bread, and Frank looked at the children. Maybe some candy for being good? The children cheered. Frank handed them each a piece of candy. After they left, Frank turned to Jake. See? Still saving lives, just differently. Jake understood now. Frank wasn't hiding from his heroism. He was living it. Every day, every customer, every small kindness. Real heroes don't need parades. They just need purpose. And Frank Martinez had found his purpose behind a cash register in a corner store, serving the community he had spent his life protecting. Because sometimes the greatest service is the quietest service. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Frank? Someone who chose service over recognition. Someone whose heroism was hidden in plain sight. Share their name in the comments. Tell us their story. At Silent Heroes Stories, we believe the most powerful heroes are often the most humble. If this story touched you, subscribe and share it. These quiet heroes deserve to be remembered. See you in the next story. And remember, if someone seems too calm under pressure, maybe they've been trained for much worse and chose something much better.